You know, when you've only ever been inside one company, it's easy to think the way they do things is just how it's done. But the moment you step outside and start working with a variety of different organizations, you start to notice things, patterns, the habits that really build trust and shape culture, the blind spots that quietly hold leaders back, and those small everyday actions that over time make the biggest difference. Today on the All Inclusive podcast, I'm once again joined by Gareth Whalley, founder of Big Bang People Solutions. When Gareth last joined me here on the podcast, he was leading inclusion at Levi Strauss. Since then, he's made the big leap into running his own business, partnering with organizations across industries to strengthen their leadership, improve workplace culture, and embed inclusion that lasts. Gareth shares what this shift has taught him, the leadership patterns that repeat no matter the sector, the overlooked power of recognition, and how external pressures are reshaping inclusion strategies right now. I love this conversation because Gareth doesn't talk theory. He's in the room with leaders every day, seeing what works and what doesn't. His perspective is honest, practical, and full of lessons any leader can apply, whether you're running a team, a department, or a whole organization. Before we dive in, if you're enjoying these conversations, make sure you hit that subscribe button and share this episode with a colleague or a friend who cares about building stronger, more inclusive workplaces. Now, without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Gareth. Hi, Gareth. Welcome back to the All Inclusive podcast.
Hi, Natasha. Thanks so much for having me back.
Yeah, it's so great to see you. So happy to have you back. A lot has changed since you were last on the podcast. I think when we last spoke, you were leading inclusion, diversity, equity over at Levi Strauss. You have since moved on and you are consulting under Big Bang People Solutions. Amazing. It's been over a year and a half now. So for our listeners, for those that don't know you, hadn't listened to our previous episode, and also for those that have listened to our previous episode and now are wanting to hear the catch up, kind of talk us through that transition, like what sparked it? Because I know a lot of leaders right now are probably in similar situations and are thinking of branching out, doing some more consulting, working for themselves. So tell us all, what's the journey been like?
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, it's been a year and a quarter already. So actually, since we had our last conversation on here, that was around that time actually when I was starting the transition. So yeah, for those that don't know me or haven't come across me before, my name's Gareth. My pronouns are he, him, and I have spent over 20 years sort of working in a variety of organizations in lots of different kind of HR capacities. So I've gone from shared services to HR business partnering to a lot of time in reward, um, performance management, talent management, and then most of the last 6 years fully focused in DE&I. I took the opportunity to move into self-employment last year. And it was, I mean, just being honest, it was a product of a redundancy situation. So there was a trigger there. But I'd actually already, I'd always said that last corporate gig was the last one, and this was my long-term plan. Just came around a bit quicker than I expected. But I just thought, you know what, take it. There's obviously the universe moving in a certain way. And I said, let's not look for another job. Let's pull that trigger now. And so I set up Big Bang People Solutions as an opportunity to help organizations with the parts of their HR work which are typically under-resourced, underfunded, and not done very well, to be honest. And my passion, has always been about helping people to have a better time at work. And so that's really what the business is founded on. That's the mission of the business. So we consult on DE&I, on reward and recognition, and on change management and communications. So again, it's just the bits that people tend to have a bad experience of, and we're just here to kind of help that along. Transition was great. I mean, I've been very fortunate that all of the work that I've done so far over the last year and a bit has come organically through my existing network, which is amazing. And I'm very grateful that I had all of those years in, quite visible kind of corporate roles to build that network, because that's what that's where the work's being generated from. Interestingly, I would say it's been quite an even split overall, kind of on balance between DE&I work and reward work, with a little bit of change management and comms work thrown in as well. And I've also helped some organizations with bigger sort of HR strategy, organizational development kind of pieces as well. So yeah, so far so good.
Oh, lovely. That's awesome. So, what would you say has been the most surprising part so far for you?
I'm surprised how much I'm enjoying running a business, right? So, as a long-term HR professional, that's not a skill that we develop. It's not
Mm,
knowledge that we have necessarily. Um, and there's a bit of a geek in me as well. So actually, the sort of cyclical aspect of, the billing cycle and all of that stuff that just is inherent with running a business. Actually, I quite enjoy that. It turns out I'm pretty good at it. I'm kind of on top of things with the accounting and that kind of stuff. So that's been, I suppose, a bit of a surprise. Um, I think one of the other big learnings that I had, and actually, so when I first started on this chapter, I had a coach that I was working with, and she gave me some advice really early on, which I didn't take immediately, but it soon came to light that I needed to. And that was that you're going to get to a point quite quickly where you can't do it all yourself.
right.
And so that's it in a few ways, right? So one, I've got an amazing accountant who gives me really good advice from a business perspective. Secondly, I've taken on a virtual assistant that helps me with some of the more kind of background stuff. And then thirdly, I've had the great opportunity to bring three associates on board. So I've now got three people who I work with quite regularly, to bring in additional kind of capacity or expertise in certain areas. And that's wonderful because, not only does it help me deliver the work to the clients in the best way possible and as quickly as possible, but it also means I'm giving other people work. And I didn't expect to be able to say that at this juncture in the journey, but I'm so happy that I can. Actually, it's been amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. So, I know you said that this is something that an advice that your coach gave you quite early, which you didn't kind of take up immediately. For those that are looking to kind of start their own business, what was the kind of revelation for you that was like, right, no, okay, I need to start taking on some additional help? Like, what do you think was stopping you from doing that?
Well, I think one, you worry about how much money is in the bank and can you pay
Mm,
people, right? The income stability is a different kettle of fish completely, right? Compared to
yeah.
the corporate environment. And I think secondly, because I suppose as a business owner and somebody who owns the brand and it's so tied to you as a person, there's also a bit of like developing trust and almost like, giving away control a little bit, which I think I was struggling with. But also, quite honestly, the trigger that really led to me actually doing it was so after 4 or 5 really quiet weeks over, second half of December, early January, clients were taking ages to wake up from the holidays. It was kind of famine to feast. I suddenly went from having like 4 or 5 quiet weeks to suddenly I was like, oh, sugar,
Yeah.
I've got a lot on my plate here and I don't know
Mm,
that I can deliver everything that I've agreed to do. And so it kind of forced my hand, um, in a way that was really great because it meant that I could continue to give my focus to existing clients where I was already committed. It meant that I could, as I said, bring capacity, but also real expertise into some of the work with new clients where I'd signed contracts that were taking a while to kind of come to fruition. And it was just like, well, if I don't do this, this work isn't going to get done, or I'm going to have to do it all and burn out. And that was never on the agenda. And so that was the trigger really, but it's been brilliant because, if I think about the skill sets that I've brought in, while I've got all of this broad HR experience, one of my associates is a real sort of deep sort of OD practitioner, organizational development practitioner, and that's been really meaningful for one of my clients. Um, Somebody else who works with me is a former reward professional, but who retrained as a copywriter. And so I've got a real like total rewards comms
yeah,
expert
that's
on my
awesome.
team as well.
Mm.
So see what I mean? So it's ways of supplementing my own experience and my capacity and giving other people work at the same time, which is wicked.
Yeah, it does really sound like you've managed to find a really good group of people that can provide you with the immediate, like, that impact, and like provide you with like that additional perspective within the key areas of what your business is actually doing with organizations right now. And that blend between copyright and reward, that's awesome. I mean, that's like needle in a haystack, I think, that sort of that sort of combination. So that's great for you.
Yeah, I think I've only met one or two other DEI practitioners who have a reward background. It's not a normal combination. So
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So, for anyone who is listening that are actually considering to take that leap, what would you say? Like, what advice would you give them overall, based looking back on what your experience has been so far?
yeah, I mean, one, have confidence in your own experience that you can do it. It does feel daunting. Um, but actually, I think believing in yourself is the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is, so contextually, think about where we are now, especially in the inclusion space, right? So externally, the world is difficult. Politics are getting in the way of the work, quite honestly. And sadly, there's a lot of practitioners who are coming onto the job market because organizations have decided that they don't need as much resource, or they're not going to focus on the work as much. And so actually there's a risk of feeling like you're coming into a saturated market. And so my second piece of advice is against that, which is, really figure out what is your unique selling point. Like what is the niche or the niches that you bring together that sets you apart from who your competition might. So again, for me, that's the fact that I can pull all of these threads of HR together. Yeah, there's depth in DE&I, but there's also depth in other areas. And then there's that broad kind of top of the T, as we talk about T-shapes kind of development. And so I'm able to bring a much more holistic story around HR practice, with that depth in certain areas than maybe some others can't. But obviously, there's other practitioners out there who've gone lots deeper in other areas than I have. So just really, I think, reflecting on where your depth is and where your strength is, and bringing that to bear as your unique selling point. But that leads me on to my third one as well. So I remember when I was writing the copy for my website. So we're going back to like, April, May last year. Um, and I was writing the our services page. I was putting all this stuff on there, and I was like, why are you putting that there? You don't want to do it. All right. So you've got,
Yeah, yeah.
got experience in it, but you're not going to enjoy it. So why the hell would you sell that to clients? Because if
Mm.
they want it, you're going to have to do it. So that's the third one, is like, focus on the stuff that you love doing in as much as the stuff that you can do.
I feel like the whole point of owning your own business, doing work for yourself, is that you get to do the work that you actually enjoy doing. And so don't forget that when you are actually taking that leap. I think it's so important. I mean, that's one of the things, the reason why I started the podcast is because I was interested, it was a subject matter that I was interested in, that I had kind of some experience in, and I wanted to learn more in.
Yeah.
And I like talking and I like meeting new people.
Something you and I
So,
have in common.
yeah, do you know? So I'm like, well, of course I'm going to do a podcast where I get to learn from people, I get to meet new people, and I get to share all of that. So it just made sense for me. And I think it can easily, or you can easily get swept up in, oh, I need to offer this particular service because that's where I'm getting a lot of demand from. And that's absolutely fine. But you just really want to make sure that you're finding that fine balance and you're not overly committing yourself to work that you just generally do not like doing. Because that's, the passion that is what's going to keep driving you through the times in which you are actually quite quiet. Because there will be times in your business, unfortunately, where you may have a quiet period. And so doing the work that you love is what's really going to keep pushing you through those hard times, I think.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is, and this won't be the same for everyone, but something I've always thrived on, as you can probably tell from my background across all these different parts of HR and beyond, is variety. So for me to be able to be working on 4, 5, 6 clients all at the same time and with different topics, so you're switching from, I might be talking to a charity one minute, then a global manufacturer the next minute, then a retailer the next minute. And one of them, it might be about a bonus scheme. One of them, it might be about ERGs, employee resource groups. Another one, it might be about a recognition program. Like that variety really
Mm.
keeps me going. Now, this is another learning actually that comes with a mental load. So you can have the most complicated role in an organization, but you're doing that work within one organizational context. Blowing that out into 4, 5, 6, 7 organizations all at once, and the switching not only from organizational context and topic, but also like things like language.
Mm.
The word employees, people talk about associates, people talk about co-workers, people talk about colleagues. Like it's a really basic example, but you've sort of got to remember that and switch between them. So there's a mental load that comes with that variety, but that's really what I love is the ability to sort of switch and do lots of different stuff. So yeah.
Oh, great. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and go a little bit more into kind of the overall leadership aspect of inclusion work and just people work that's going on right now,
Yeah.
because I think it's something that a lot of leaders at the moment are grappling with. So what are you seeing are the patterns with senior leaders when it comes to engaging in kind of that inclusive leadership piece?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've got a fresher perspective now because I've been working with quite a few different organizations to add on to my own sort of corporate experience before. And I think, look, it goes in multiple ways. I think external context is really relevant, and I guess what I'm observing is some leaders are paying more attention to that external context around DE&I work than others. Um, I'm really fortunate actually that all of my DE&I clients through Big Bang People Solutions are very much like staying the course. Like they've basically said, look, this is part of who we are. We believe in the business case as much as we believe in the human case and the fact that it's the right thing to do. And we're not going to slow down. Um, whether that's a public statement or whether that's just something that they're talking about internally. So the work continues, and that's great. Um, it does come with some reticence. I mean, obviously, even the leaders that are saying that, they're still keeping their eye on what's going on externally. Nobody wants to become a hard. So I think there's caution. But yeah, like I say, with my own clients, it's been pretty steady. Now, I've also done some other work as an associate for another organization, and one of the clients that I worked with through them, very different situation because while they're a European headquartered business, they have a sizable operation in the US and they're a federal contractor to the US government. So whether they like it or not, a lot of their income comes from the US and from the US government. And actually,
Mm.
that's a source of income that they can't afford to lose to keep the business going. So they've had to make adjustments, not only in the US, but actually to the way that they're thinking about their global DE&I work, um, to sort of, respect and respond to those demands from the US government. I spent a day in Brussels with the European ERG leaders back in, I think it was April time. And you can imagine they were a bit sort of incredulous. They were a bit like, well,
Mm.
that's over there. It's the other side of the pond. Like that doesn't feel like it matters to us. And of course, they're reflecting on things like European CSR directive. They're thinking about European Accessibility Act. They're thinking about some of the changes that are coming with the UK employment bill, right? It's actually pushing us more down more DE&I work rather than
Yeah,
less. And
yeah,
so
it
there's a
is.
real
Yeah.
conflict there or a sort of
Mm.
dissonance, which they were really grappling with. Um, and my job, of course, was to help them think through, right, in this new world, how do you continue to do really meaningful and impactful ERG work? And what tweaks do you need to make to the way that you communicate it, the way you manage a membership, the way that you choose topics, even potentially for discussion or events or whatever? And I think we got there in the end, but I do think it's a good example of how organizational context, and especially the extent to which the US plays a role in your organizational context. I think that honestly is what's kind of driving some of those kind of leader mentalities around this work. Um, what's great to see is I've got a few clients that are doubling down even more. It's not even continuing. It's like investing more in terms of time and resources and money um, to make even more of an impact. So it's across the board.
Oh, that's awesome. So I want to kind of just circle back with the organisation that you had mentioned, because I know a lot of the leaders that are listening are kind of probably more likely grappling with a very similar situation. Um, what what would you say, or from the experience and from the work experience that you gained working with that particular organisation, what were some of the key strategies that worked really well that other leaders listening may well be able to apply in their situations? I mean, I know it will be different across all different organizations, but are there any like kind of key building blocks that they could really look at to help them?
I guess the key direction that that situation in the US is driving is a shift of gears from, where we might historically have been very centered on interventions that target specific groups. That's no longer really acceptable in the same way that it was prioritized before.
Mm.
If I continue with ERGs as one example, ERGs are actually a great vehicle for continuing work in inclusion despite this backlash because um, they create spaces for everyone to learn. As long as you're very clear that your ERGs are open to everyone, they're not closed communities, and that allyship is really important, and that it's all about bringing people together around shared experiences and learning about others' experiences. Like that's actually really good and permissible, so to speak, and it's a great example of something that we can sort of continue and dial up a bit. But some of those programs, obviously, that we might have had before, that targeted the career efficacy or the development or whatever of specific groups, we really have to rethink those. We really have to rethink, well, how do we create programs that still serve those groups but make it open to everyone? And I think that's the general mantra is um, inclusion for everyone. And how do we make sure that the workplace works for everyone? As I'm saying those words, I'm very conscious that that could risk sounding like all lives matter, and that is not what I'm saying at all.
No, no, no. I completely hear where you're coming from. My next question was like, do you feel that in doing that it dilutes the work in terms of being, or in terms of being, or providing those particular groups with the opportunities or with fairer opportunities that they necessarily didn't have otherwise? Um, what would you kind of say to that? I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Of course, and listen, you should, and you're right to. And yet, listen, I have my reservations. I honestly do. And I think, where the US is not part of the story and that situation isn't part of the organizational context, of course, I'm still working with clients on things that are very specifically targeted because that's really what we're talking about here is the work of equity, right? It's about
Mm.
leveling the playing field. It's about making strategic interventions that get different groups to the same starting point as other more advantaged groups. Like that's what equity is all about. So I think there's risk inherent there, definitely. I think there's nothing to stop you still using the data that you have at your fingertips to test whether things are working for certain groups versus others and making targeted interventions. I think you've just got to be really cautious about how you design programs and how you think about bringing that work to life, and especially how you communicate it, even if that's only internal communication, because we all know that within any organization, it's a reflection of society, and that's as much from a political leaning perspective as any other. And things can leak and be misconstrued, and I've experienced that a couple of times in my career, and it's not a nice place to be. So again, I think the word caution comes back to mind as well, Tash.
Yeah, awesome. No, thanks so much for that, Gareth. Because I completely agree with you. I think that whilst sometimes internally these sorts of changes in language or the way in which we're approaching these newer programs and we're kind of opening it up a little bit more to everyone in that sense can sometimes feel like you're missing the mark or you're not servicing those individual groups or those specific groups that in the way that you wanted to. But I do think that we kind of need to just be honest with ourselves and really look at, like, this is the way the world is right now. This is where things are at the moment. And in order for us to continue pushing forward, we are going to have to do things differently. And in that, there doesn't necessarily mean that different is less than. It doesn't have to be. And I think if we're intentional with how in which we communicate the work, the impact, measuring it correctly and accurately and as specifically as we can. I agree with you. I think if you can measure it well for those particular groups, it will then help inform your next steps going forward and how best to kind of package things to ensure that you're continually making progress for those particular groups that you're wanting to, and you're kind of really
Yeah.
leveling that playing field.
Yeah. And I think also, I mean, I mentioned it a few minutes ago, but like, let's not lose sight of the fact that there is a business case here.
Yeah.
Like, let's remember what this work actually is about. This work is about bringing as many perspectives as possible from different backgrounds and different experiences into the work so that it is shaped with the outcome in mind. It's about creating equity in the organization so that people's experiences are leveled up. Let's say that, and it's about building inclusive spaces so that everybody feels that they can do their best work. So if everybody's thriving on the basis of that and all of that creativity, innovation, diverse, all of those things that we know are true about diverse organizations, like if that's working, it has an impact on the customer, it has an impact on products and services, it has an impact on the bottom line of the organization. Like there's it's been proven so many times, right? So we need to make sure that we're not losing sight of that, like what the work is and why it's important for the business. And the more we can make that specific, like super specific to the context of the individual organization, your own customers, what do they look like? Who are they? Your own products and services, your own workforce. There's also a tendency in this space to be a bit generic or cookie cutter, or like just see what other people are doing online and replicate that within your own organization.
Yeah.
Like that,
Yeah. Very
that's
copy and
also
paste.
not going to help because it's not, again, back to leaders, right? Senior leaders want to see tangible outcomes for this specific organization. So if the strategy is contextualized and the work is contextualized, the outcomes are also going to be contextualized to your organization.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so enjoying this conversation, by the way, Gareth. I'm just like, give me more. So you have touched in this conversation rewards, recognition. And actually, it's an area in which, for me, I'm kind of delving a little bit more deeper in, and with the show and with the podcast, I'm reaching out to more kind of reward recognition, kind of well-being leaders in that space, because I think it does play quite an integral part of a business and of that of the work of trying to ensure that everyone feels valued, respected, and heard, and that kind of inclusion piece. How do you see reward schemes intertwining or interlinking to inclusion with the work that you're doing with organisations at the moment?
Yeah, look, the way I think about it is very broadly. Reward programs, reward schemes exist primarily to encourage and reinforce the behaviors that generate better results for the organization. But in doing that, you're also sending a signal to the people who are demonstrating those behaviors and completing those tasks and whatever, that you value them. So think about it through different lenses. The salary that you get, that's about valuing the skills and knowledge that you bring to the organization based on whatever the market pays for those skills, right? So you're saying, well, this is what this job is worth, and that's what we'll pay. So it's reflective of your knowledge and the skills and the experience that you've built up. Basics. Think about a bonus scheme. What a bonus scheme basically does is it says, if you help us earn enough money, we'll pay you some of that money. So that, I mean, I'm really like boiling it down
Yeah,
to basics.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's true though, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So think about a bonus scheme will normally have like business metrics, might be revenue, might be profit, it might be volume sold, whatever it might be. Everybody in the organization needs to feel part of that and feel like their contributions and the work that they do ultimately, whether it's directly or indirectly, lead to the achievement of those financial metrics that the bonus is then calculated and paid out on. So if it's done well, it's like, well, you did this work, it contributed to these things, we value that, here's some money. Long-term incentives even, right? So if you think about it, that could be like a stock-based long-term incentive, it could even be long-term cash, there's other kinds of vehicles to deliver it. But typically what they're saying is we see you as somebody who's going to make a meaningful contribution to this business in the long term, and we want to reward your potential. So already with these kind of colder, harder kind of types of rewards, you kind of see the connection to inclusion. The one that's really overlooked often is recognition. And this is the one that connects most closely to inclusion. Because if you think about it, the act of recognizing someone for behaviors or values demonstrated or a task or a project that they completed, that is a behavior of what you're basically seeing is I see you, see what you did, I valued it, and I want to demonstrate my appreciation for that. So recognizing is an inclusive behavior. And the correlation between people who are engaged in recognition and the people who feel included is actually really strong. What organizations often miss when it comes to recognition is not only does it have a wonderful effect on the person receiving the recognition, because obviously there's the praise and the feeling valued and the
Yeah.
dopamine that releases. Two other things come with it, right? One is it has a ripple effect because other people see it happening. In fact, three things. One is it has a ripple effect because others people see it happening and they want to get in on that. Two is the person who received the recognition is like, oh, that thing I did or that behavior I demonstrated was really appreciated. I'm going to do more of that. So the organization gets more and more from that individual of what is desired. The third one, which is the least understood, is actually for the giver of the recognition, there's also pleasure, there's also joy, there's also like dopamine release. And actually, the feeling of the response that you get from giving recognition is also more likely to give you the impetus to keep delivering more recognition.
Mm.
So I talk about a ripple effect, and it's almost like a butterfly effect, maybe, right? What it's all about, in essence, is building a habit that creates a culture of appreciation within the organization. Well, of course, there's a byproduct of that, which is if everyone's feeling appreciated and valued, like there's such leading indicators of feeling included, so that you can see why there's such a connection,
Yeah.
and you can see why I'm so passionate and obsessed, by doing work in this space because I really believe it's such a culture amplifier.
Yeah, definitely. Are you seeing organizations understanding that more now or not? Do you feel like there's been like a bit of a stalemate, they're not really getting it, or you are hearing more and more organizations understanding that link and are taking the right steps to amplify it?
I mean, I think like anything, it's a change management initiative. You can't just put it out there and expect it to work without kind of nurturing it and caring for it and encouraging it and promoting it and all of those things. I mean, you can do it in many, many ways. You can do it on a shoestring, you can spend millions on it, right? It's a whole spectrum. I think organizations that do it well make it part of an ongoing conversation about their culture, and they invest in communications and they invest in promotion and they invest in spotlighting stories of great recognition. The ones where it is floundering a bit is largely because maybe the leaders haven't got to grips with it. The leaders don't believe in it, maybe.
Mm.
So there's some influencing to do. Maybe where it's just not part of the story. It really has to be integrated rather than just this thing over there. You've also got to keep it fresh. in terms of like program design, the way that you deliver recognition, like it can get stale. So you've also got to think about, you know, periodically, like bringing something new into the mix for people to engage with. So it kind of, re-sparks the energy around it. It's interesting though, Tash, I've had a few clients now where the start of our conversation at the sort of pre-proposal stage is I need a bonus scheme.
Yeah.
I need to incentivize
Yeah, I was gonna
people to
ask, like,
contribute more.
what are you finding?
Yeah, so
The
so quite
question is like the challenge for them. Like, how do you
well,
identify there is something wrong?
yeah. So they come to me because they think a bonus scheme is a good way to help them improve business results because it incentivizes people to deliver against specific objectives and
Mm,
specific metrics that lead to growth. And that's absolutely true. And there's nothing wrong with a bonus scheme. But there's been at least two, if not three, occasions over the last year and a bit where that's been the starting point of the conversation. And as we've got into it and we started to talk about their culture and we started to talk about like what it is that they're actually trying to achieve, it's come down to either their performance management system isn't doing what it needs to do, or they haven't got recognition in place. And it's that behavioral stuff that will kind of help fix the issues. So none of these things are a silver bullet, right? They don't operate in isolation. And that's why we talk about a total rewards model or a total rewards
yeah.
strategy, because your pay and your benefits and your recognition and your well-being and your career mobility and flexible working, like all those things have to work sort of holistically together so that people, really feel like they're getting a good kind of overall deal. But I think the important thing for me and what I try and kind of instill in my clients is be very specific about which lever serves which purpose and when you pull them to get the value from them.
That's awesome advice, Gareth. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I feel like we could have another like half an hour speaking on rewards and recognition. I feel like I've opened Pandora's box. I might have to have you back on, back on
Let's
the
do
show to talk
episode
about
3. Yeah.
that. But no, I've so thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much again for gracing us on the show and sharing your insights, your journey so far. Keep soaring, keep doing your thing. You're an amazing leader. So for our listeners out there, if they want to get to know you, if they want to reach out to you and have you on board to help them with their strategies in their organizations, how best can they do that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for your super kind words. It's really lovely to hear. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, just Gareth Whalley, Whalley. I've also got a company page on LinkedIn, which I'll admit isn't the most active at this point. That turns out that's quite hard to keep going. But that's just Big Bang People Solutions on LinkedIn. But actually, probably the company website is the best place to go if you really want to understand in a bit more depth about the kinds of services that we offer. And that's just Big Bang People, all one word, .com.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I will be putting links to your company website, also your LinkedIn as well, in the show notes for the show. So everyone listening, do check out those two, Gareth LinkedIn and also Big Bang People Solutions website as well. Once again, Gareth, just before you leave us though, I'm going to squeeze one tiny bit more out of you. So,
Okay.
what would you say is your parting piece of advice for our listeners today?
Find a way to do what you love as often as you possibly can
Oh, I love that.
because it will contribute to your ability to live authentically. And that I think is so important.
Mm,
You know, I think recently I've reflected on some of the ways that I've kind of felt over the course of my corporate career and some of the things that working in that kind of environment generates, this sense of like bigger, better, more, chasing the promotion, chasing the
mm,
title, chasing the pay rise. And actually, what I've come to realize is living authentically and living with purpose trumps perception any day of the week. So find and do what you love as much as you possibly can.
oh, that is the best way I could have thought of to round off this episode. Once again, Gareth, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on, sharing all of your insights with us. I can't wait to speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Tash. See you for episode 3.
Yeah.